A barren woman's life took a bittersweet turn when she welcomed an 11-month-old baby into her life and discovered she's a carbon copy of her after suffering several heartbreaks in a broken marriage at the age of 30. Business tycoon Katie Hudson was looking forward to a new life as an independent, carefree woman where she wouldn't be burdened by the whims of her toxic partners and could live her life on her own terms. As a result, after divorcing her toxic spouse, Katie moved into a new home and started fresh just as she'd done when she was a college grad. She bought a new house in a lovely Texan neighborhood, and when she found herself a bit settled in, she decided to do something she'd wanted to for a long time: start a family. Katie adored children and wanted to have a large family with lots of babies and a supportive husband when fate failed to provide her with a loving spouse. She thought she could do it independently and began applying to foster agencies to experience the joys of motherhood. Unfortunately, she was infertile, so she could never give birth. However, she was lucky enough that multiple foster agencies accepted her application and contacted her for further procedures. She chose to go forward with the first agency that reached out to her and brought 4 beautiful girls into her life: Amira, Kathy, Chloe, and Cassandra, with 4-year-old quadruplets who have been temporarily taken in by the agency after social services discovered their parents couldn't care for them. When Katie learned she'd be fostering 4 little girls, she was over the moon. The agency had recommended she take care of only one at a time, but she didn't want to separate the siblings, so she took them all in. However, it wasn't so easy for her as Cassandra wasn't really fond of her, which is why the potential new mom had to go through a tough time. "You're not like mommy, and I don't like you," Cassandra once yelled at her when she was serving her breakfast. At that, little Amira stepped in as Katie's savior. "You shouldn't say that, Cass. It's bad manners. Mommy says that we should always love others, but I don't like her. I miss mommy and I want to go home." "You're correct, Cassandra. I'm not your mother," Katie patiently explained to her. "But if you behave like a good girl, you'll be able to see your mommy soon. All of you will be able to see her soon." "Girls, don't worry," she said and hugged the girls. "I want to go to mommy too. Do you promise us we can see mommy again?" Chloe and Kathy asked in a dejected tone, and Katie felt really bad for them. "Of course you will, Kathy and Chloe. Don't worry," she replied with a smile as time went on. Katie's compassion and care in dealing with Cassandra earned her the affection of the little girl and her sisters as well. Needless to say, Katie had fallen in love with the girls too, and at one point she felt like adopting them all. But she knew she couldn't do that because the agency had already told her that the girls' birth parents only entrusted their kids for fostering, but not adoption. And so when Katie got a call from the agency 2 months later saying the girls would be reunited with their birth parents because their conditions had improved and they had filed for their children's custody, she had no choice but to let the girls go as she promised. However, after they left, she contacted more agencies, this time with the sole aim of adopting a child and raising her as her own, as she felt she was trained enough to have her own child. Now, however, she received a call a week later that brought an unexpected turn in her life. "Am I speaking to Mrs. Katie Hudson?" a woman's voice asked her on the call. "Miss Katie Hudson," Katie corrected, emphasizing that she preferred to be called Miss. "Apologies, Miss Hudson. My name is Anna Baker, and I'm calling you to inform me about the status of your application. We begun the processing of your application, and as you may have received an email from us this morning, we'd like to inform you that, based on your preferences, we have a child who we believe you might be interested in adopting. She requires immediate placement." Oh goodness, Katie felt a little overwhelmed, but the only answer that came out of her mouth was, "Yes, I'm ready to welcome her home." Little did she know she was in for a surprise. After making a series of phone calls that afternoon, little Casey was dropped off at her house hours later. A wave of astonishment washed over Katie as she held her for the first time and looked at her face. "She resembles me to a T. House. This even possible?" Katie was perplexed as she held Casey in her arms, having caught a clear glimpse of her face. Suddenly, the baby girl looked at her and smiled, extending her hands closer to touch her face, and it was then that Katie noticed a bracelet on the 11-month-old's wrist, bearing the same initials as hers. At that point, Katie was stunned. How did Casey look so much like her, and how did her bracelet have the same initials? She immediately contacted the adoption agency for more information about Casey's biological parents, and in the interim, she underwent a DNA test with a child which revealed they were at 24.6 match, completely baffled by the whole scenario. She has the adoption agency to expedite Casey's paperwork, only to discover that Casey's mother was her mother Amelia and the little baby girl was her biological sister. It turns out Amelia, who'd abandoned Katie when she was 10 because she had fallen in love with a wealthy man, had given birth to Casey at the age of 53. However, there were some complications with her pregnancy, which is why she died shortly after giving birth. Casey's biological father didn't want to raise her when he welcomed a new woman in his life, so he gave her up for adoption. Katie couldn't believe her ears when she learned all of it. Looking at Casey reminded her of how their mother had left her when she was so young, but she decided she wouldn't do the same with her sister. She didn't want to follow in the footsteps of their mother and chose to raise Casey with love. Looks like you and now we're meant to be together, baby. She told Casey that evening while she was rocking her, "I'm glad at least we have each other. I'll give you both the mothers and sisters love, and you won't be alone. It's a promise, but sometimes I wish Mom would have loved me," she murmured as she gently placed Casey in her cramp.